That says that the outcome that we expect is different. Similarly, the resources in different part or different colleges or with different students would be different. And therefore, when you look at this framework, please look at it that what suits you the best. And looking at the steps could be the same, but depending upon the kind of projects, you could have different steps that are addressing different requirements, and you may give emphasis to different steps at that point of time. Moving ahead, the other tips are that here are the various steps that we have defined, but there are various layers within the steps, which means that there are sub-points and uniqueness. For example, when we looked at research, we looked at primary and secondary research. Now, when you do a primary and secondary research, there are various ways in which you could do research. The research could be by a focus group, the research could be by Delphi method, which is experts, the research could be by a questionnaire, it could be personal in-depth interviews, it could be research which is completely abstract. So while we talk about research, and if research is one of the steps, there could be various sub-points and layers within the same, and therefore unique things there. We talk about the next is horizontal breadth, which is talking about holistic and multidisciplinary. Bring in the other people who could help you and bring new ideas into the entire process. There could be somebody who's completely not linked with your project but could bring in interesting ideas. The sequence, the emphasis upon which step to come where. So the sequencing depending on your project, and different modes for different context. So you could use, like if the context is different, which I explained to you before, could be cost, then you use different model for doing that. So let's move ahead further and we talk about further trips. So what are we actually trying to achieve, friends? We are trying to achieve from reactive to becoming proactive. And how can that happen? Because many times we have projects which you face and you say that I'm not able to come up with original idea. I'm not able to source it. But can you use individual sourcing? Instead of that, can you use as sharing and networking for expansion and enrichment? It could be expansion of your knowledge, or you could enrich yourself with the project ideas or further ideas about a product. So here we are saying it could move from individual sourcing to sharing and networking. It can further move from the innovation value chain. Now here, friends, it's very interesting to share with you the innovation value chain. When we talk about an innovation value chain and we talk to the students, many of them say that they want to do the entire thing by themselves. Today we are in an age of collaboration. It could be that you have been able to create a product in a project. So you are doing a project, and the project could be a large one where your role could be one aspect of a project, and that's one part of the value chain. Sometimes some students are brilliant at idea generation. So if they are able to come up with brilliant ideas, could it be that your ideas and a concept prototype is good enough? And some may be very good at actualizing the same. So could it be that we understand that the entire value chain of innovation, and it's a long value chain in which each step adds value to it? Can we identify which step do we want to administer, where we are good at and we have resources? So we take that aspect and not try to solve the complete problem, which could be very big. Or even if you want to, you could break it into various steps and look at each step at a time and add value to it. That's what we mean by innovation value chain. And the last point here, the third point, is concept of design and launch. And from moving to that, most of the time students would feel that they would want to design and launch something of their own. But you may also look at redesign and relaunch. There are a lot of products in the market at this moment that could be completely redesigned. So instead of looking at a new product, you could also look at redesigning them. Or there are many products that could be relaunched and relaunched in a different market for different segment of people with different application. So here we are talking about that don't just look at original in terms of designing things originally and launching it. It also means that you can redesign and relaunch those things. So that's what is the second aspect. Here is something which I would like to share. That's when the student, this is from the students' projects. On the classic left hand side, you would see is a classic cyclical process, and though it is non-linear and it is cyclical, however, when you do a project, you will realize that it looks something like on the right hand side. It's not a cyclical moving from one step to another. It's sometime moving from right, that is define the idea, to going to brainstorming, and then coming back to the need for finding and benchmarking, and then you go to prototype, you go to testing, and you may, this is exactly how your project may look at. Why I'm sharing this with you is sometime a lot of students would say, I have done the first step and I have done the second step and the third step, and yet you are not reaching anywhere. And the reason for that is that while you are learning by doing, you could move from the step 1 to step 5 and to 3, though the sequence and the cyclical process remains same. However, the movement changes depending on the type of project, depending on the resources, and depending on what you apply. So please don't worry about, because we are always taught to learn in a stepwise manner, that this comes first, second, third, fourth. That's fine. That is the process and that is the steps of process. But while you are doing your project and assignments, you can move from one to the other and multiple times. That's what I wanted to share from this, is the real process flow while you're doing the project. Now, having said that, let's look at the aspect which is taking a little bit different from what we were discussing right now. Till now we were discussing about a framework. It was talking about a process. But within a framework, if we were to look at, and which is one of the biggest problems. So two of the biggest problems that most of the engineering students come up and say is, where do they source their ideas, and where do they get ideas, and how do they filter the ideas, and how do they articulate. So here we are talking about that, how do you go about sourcing of ideas or scouting for problems, how do you filter those problems, and how do you articulate them. These are the first three steps of the framework, and let's get into now the tools and techniques. So till now we were looking at a broader framework. Now we are getting into tools and techniques that you could use. So let me share with you certain tools and techniques that you could use. Where do you source the problem or ideas? When we said you source the ideas for projects from self, others, and environment, what does that mean? When we talk about self, we are talking about sourcing the problems from memory, imagination, or dreams. Just to give you a small example, if you were traveling, as I said before, or let's take another example. If you were using an appliance at home, like let's say you are using a fan, and you realize from your memory that or your experience that your fan after a certain period of time gets dirty, but you want to see that your fan that is at home should not become dirty, so you don't need to clean it all the time. Now here is a problem. How can you design a fan which is in a manner not getting the dust on it, so the dust does not stick on it? Can you come up with that? And that's your problem. So you have found a problem from your own self and your surrounding. If you realize that you are using a mobile phone and you have some problem with the mobile phone, so let's say initially a lot of people had a problem with battery life, and that's why research went into solving the problem of battery life. So here is the problem that you have experienced, or the problem that has come from your memory, or it could be something else. Like for example, here is when we look at dreams, there is a very interesting thing, and I'm sure some of you know that when Kikule was thinking about the structure of benzene in his daydream, he came about and thought of a snake eating his own tail, and that looked at a circular manner. And when we looked at that circular manner, we realized that it was a structure of benzene. So he was able to come up with a structure of benzene there. That's by dream and imagination. So you can find a lot of problems by self. You can find a lot of problems that can come from the environment. You can scout for them. It could be experiences of the things that are happening in the environment that you read in the media. And you could look at that from resources. Like if you look at the resource, it can come from knowledge resource. You could find that some problem that is there, which was a project that somebody else was doing, it is documenting, and you want to take it to next level. It could be from the services or from the technology. So the scouting of the ideas or the research that you have to get for the project can come from self, others, and environment. It can also come from others in terms of industry, experts, and other users. You can talk to the other people about their understanding. And during this presentation, I think many times we have gone through how can you look at finding others' problem? How can you empathize with them? That's where self, others, and environment comes in. Moving ahead, the first aspect, memory, which I was sharing with you, it could be by the problems or it could be by the solution. You can look at how the solution. So you look at sometimes how the people have solved their household problems. They could be simple solutions that are provided using Jugaad method, or there could be logical answers as solution. It could also be from the failures of others or the failure of a product or an unsatisfied consumer. These are all the areas from which you may look at the product. So if we were to look ahead, and I would like to share with you that we have looked in the entire project till now, we have looked at the steps, and let's look at those steps. We have looked at the first aspect, the pre-problem stage, that is somebody gives you a problem, you have a passion, or you find it. But how do you go for finding your problem? And then you have defined a problem and objective and selecting and defining. So we were today discussing about the first 3 steps in the same. And friends, I'm sure that you would have many questions and many thoughts upon the same. But what I want you to leave with here is that we'll be catching up in future. But here is a thought that I want to leave. Each of the engineering student could come up with an oath that let's take ourselves, our state, and our country ahead. And how we do that? Let's file at least 1 patent during the 4 years of engineering. And when we talk about that, we talk about filing a patent and coming up with your own original products and your own original things. So today we talked about the framework, the subjects, and we also talked about the first couple of steps that are idea identification. With that, I would like to conclude, and I would like to congratulate each of you for seeing this, and I would like to put another thought that let's file a patent. And how can you do that? Is by coming up with innovation, your own original ideas, and using design to do the same. Thank you, friends.